Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Alandek again. I'm just checking in and going to have just a little announcement before we start the week. This week, we're going to be talking about the American West, and I'll have some little micro lectures for you to accentuate the work that you're doing. First, I wanted to say there are some of you who haven't done the work from last week yet, from our first week where we talked about Reconstruction. So please go in and do that work and get that done. There was just a get to know you thing for the discussion board, but then we had the module reflection, and that was really the biggest thing for you to do for last time. So please go ahead and do that if you haven't. I am accepting late work. We're in a global pandemic, so all bets are off, but you will get behind if you don't keep up. So don't blow this class off because the chemistry teacher is not letting you have late work or something like that. Get the work done. It's not too onerous, and it's important. A number of you have written some really good questions about Reconstruction and had some, I really liked the questions that you had. One of the most common questions was about the political parties, Reconstruction versus, excuse me, Republicans versus Democrats, and how that's changed. And we'll talk about that again when we get to the 1950s. But really, the Republican Party is, the party of Lincoln and Reconstruction and the Freedmen's Bureau and pushing all those things through for Reconstruction and to support the former slaves. That's going to shift in the 1950s, where really it's going to start shifting in the 1930s, right? In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, the Democrats were under Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal, and they were much more supportive of Black Americans. And so you see a real shift in the party loyalty of Black Americans to the Democratic Party in the 1930s. And then in the 1950s, when desegregation begins and some of those efforts, there's a further delineation of the parties. And the Republican Party, it's not anti-Black or anything like that, but it certainly is less oriented towards civil rights and those types of topics and issues. So that's where you see that shift, and it can be a little confusing today to look at the two political parties and realize how different they were during the Reconstruction era. So that was the biggest thing. And I'll address some of the other ones. I might make a little micro lecture of just addressing some of the questions that you all had. But that was the most common one that I wanted to address today. The things that you'll need to do for this module, and again, I'll have some micro lectures that I'll post. I have one other kind of a talking over the PowerPoint of some images that I'll do again, but I don't quite have those technologically ready, so they'll be loaded probably tomorrow. But you'll have, for your readings, you'll read part of Chapter 16. Chapter 16 is just the next chapter in our textbook. It starts with the Gilded Age and a lot of political discussion, and then the section on the American West is kind of wedged in there, and then it ends with more political stuff. Just for this week, you can just read the American West portion. If you want to read the whole chapter, you'll be ahead for next week. But that's really the topics that we'll be focusing on this week. You'll have another crash course video on the American West, which is a pretty good one. And then this week is the first of your documentary films. So we'll be watching at least 8 documentary films over the course of the semester that kind of zoom in to some of the different topics that we have. So you'll be watching a documentary called Ghost Dance and doing just a brief little quiz at the end. It's not too onerous. If you watch the film, you should be able to do well on the quiz. And then you'll also be doing your pandemic journal, which some of you have emailed and asked, can you be creative on this? Yes, I've got a student in another class who's writing a poem a day kind of thing. And, whatever you want. This is a chance for you to express yourself. I think observing the world around you is helpful as well. So if you don't want to make it about you, just make observations of the world. And that's perfectly acceptable format for this as well. I just want you to turn something in every week. Be observing the world around you. Be thinking about the world in which you live every week. And then you'll also be doing your module reflection. Now, some of you in the last module reflections, we haven't graded those yet, but some of you have done just a sentence or two in answering the big question I asked about freedom. And I really do want a big paragraph, half a page. I want you to be thoughtful and really think through all the different pieces. And that's how I'm going to do each of these module reflections is I'll have a big question for you. Sometimes I'll have 2 or 3 smaller questions, but usually the bigger question will have some smaller pieces in it, right? So this one was asking you about the different people, right? What did the wealthy white Southerners think about freedom? What did the former slaves think about freedom? What did the Northerners think about freedom, right? So you have to address each part of that question to get full credit for that. And then some of you on the 3-2-1s, the 3 things you learned, it's 3 things you learned. Some of you just put 2 things you learned. Surely out of all the materials, you've learned 3 things. So just 3 things you learned, 2 questions you have, and then 1 big takeaway. And you guys have done a pretty good job with that. Again, if you haven't done that, please submit that right away as you can, and we'll go from there. But that's the basic introduction to this, and go through the different pieces of the module. You've got a whole week to work on it. I'll make it all due on Monday again, because I think weekends are valuable for everybody. And hopefully you're working on it the whole week. And be sure to let me know if you have any questions. That's what I'm here for. Okay? All right. Thanks.